Hello, and welcome to my channel, or welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to be answering a question submitted by an Instagram follower, and the question is, how do you remain prolific under the never-ending weight of existence? So I'm going to discuss what it means to be a prolific artist, some productivity strategies and mindsets, and then some of the specific things that I do on a day-to-day basis to stay productive. And so let's start by addressing the question. So the never-ending weight of existence, I think you're spot on there, which is that it never ends. So this is what we've got to work with, it's never going to be like, if I do this, I'm going to escape the never-ending weight of existence, right? Like if I chase these things, like trying to entertain myself or like chasing highs instead of creating, like it's not actually going to ease the weight of existence. But actually it could be true that for some people art actually does ease the burden of having to go through this strange world as a human being and all these experiences that we faced, is that art can actually really like lift this burden from our chests because we're using it as a way to process those experiences and like really turn over what it means to exist. So in that sense, it could actually ease the burden rather than the burden being a barrier to you creating more art. One mindset shift that I think is very important is that you need to be a prolific artist first before you can be a good artist. Because I think I talk to a lot of people who have this idea of like, I need to really have like a developed concept, thematic statement, a thesis for my work, but they're not actually making the work. And I think it's really the other way around, is that you need to get used to really producing a high volume of work before you can even start to assess the value of it or do something intentional with it. Because it's really interesting that you talk to these people who will say like, I know I have it in me, like I know I'm a good artist, but I just don't do it. And it's like, how can you know then? Like at that point, it's kind of a delusion if you're not actually making the work. So I think that a mindset shift that could be important in this regard is quantity over quality. And okay, I'm not saying just put out a bunch of slop, okay, but if it's authentic creative expression, there is some innate quality in it. So as long as you're really expressing yourself freely, then this high quantity and volume of material, you're going to be able to sift out something good and you're going to be improving as an artist. Because I think if you're trying to judge yourself at the same time as you're making work, it's really just going to hold you back and really stifle your voice from coming out when you're making art. And I think that there's something to be said about, like, as I was mentioning, like this innate value of creativity is that if you create something really freely from the heart and without trying to cater to some sort of modern trend or like what will do well in the industry, like if you're really truly creating, like there's something beautiful in that is actually bigger than yourself in some ways. And you could attribute it to like God, or you could say something like the creative spirit or like the muses or something like that. But it's like there's something that transcends just you as a person when you are creating freely. So I think that to look at it in this way of like, I'm opening up that channel for works of art to come through me, instead of really being in this like kind of ego mindset of like, I need to put this message in my art to achieve this goal. If you're really trying to make commercially viable work, then maybe that this is not as applicable to you, because then you are really trying to create a product that is sellable. But I think that if you're still in the phase of your creative development where you're still thinking about like, how do I build a creative practice and like be a prolific artist, I think it's probably better off to start in like a more independent sort of DIY, just fostering your creativity before you start trying to, attain or achieve anything through your art. Don't waste time ruminating on negative emotions, and especially in regard to your art, like thinking about like, oh, I'm not a good artist or I haven't done enough work. Like you're literally wasting time when you're sitting there ruminating that you could be making art. And even if you're ruminating on emotions that are not related to your art, it's just kind of a waste of time to just sit there and do nothing with it, right? It's so much better to put that into the art. So it's like, even if you're feeling bad, like that's the perfect time to be creating, because it's like literally like you're exercising demons, and it's almost putting value into the work in a way, in that like when you put these really strong emotions into a piece of artwork, it resonates with other people very strongly, and maybe encourages them to actually really feel these emotions instead of like trying to intellectualize them and think them away. But when you really put them like this like raw, vibrant emotion into a work, I think that it can really be healing to yourself and others. And one mindset shift that really helped me make a lot of work is, just the idea of having a body of work without necessarily needing to do anything with it right away. So I think that if you're really caught up in this idea of like having to do a project and then sell the project, or like a product and you want to sell the product of like, I need to put out my sticker sheet now, or like I need to finish the book, etc. Like that could put pressure on you because you're really thinking about the outcomes and like things that maybe are on the more business side of art rather than just on the creative side. So I think what really helped to me is just like, I'm going to make as much art as I can, and I don't really know what I'm doing with it or what purpose it will serve, but just to have it. And like, you never know, like, you could just buy a stack of like paper and just like make drawings on it, and you don't know what you're going to use those drawings for, but it could end up being in a show, or you could trim them into postcards and sell them at an art market, or you could like scan it and turn it into some sort of digital asset. And so maybe if you're feeling productive in some time in your life, then I think that's a good time to just like really get it out there and just like make a really high volume of work. And then as it naturally occurs, you'll probably have these periods in your life where you're maybe feeling less productive, like just less of that creative energy. And so that's the perfect time to go back and reflect on all this massive stuff like that you've created and be like, okay, how can I filter this down and, make this a sellable product? So I would say like, really think of it as like two separate modes of like creation versus like trying to sell your work, and instead of like thinking about how you're going to sell your work while you're making it. All right, and on being a prolific artist, to me, I think that being a prolific artist is like one of the best compliments you can receive, because I think it's just really wonderful to just really be in that creative energy and just like be able to tap into it at any time. Like it's almost very magical in a way. So to me, my goal is to be a prolific artist more so than like being a good artist, or like any sort of those like value judgments or like goals that I might have that are maybe in the periphery of like things that will probably be achieved by my art, but like I'm not really focusing on them too much, like capturing the spirit of our times and that sort of stuff. Like that, a lot of this will come naturally just by you producing a high volume of work. And it's really like the fact that you're actually like, not even just like the works, like how many paintings have you made and that sort of thing, but just like how many hours are you putting into creative work, and like how many hours a day. Like, is the majority of your day spent creating, or is it spent consuming, or is it spent ruminating or doing some other thing like that? So it's like really, I would say like leaning into this artist as a lifestyle. So almost in like a spiritual sense of like the way that a monk spends a lot of their time in silent contemplation. Like as an artist, this is your life. Like you've chosen, or maybe you haven't chosen, like maybe you have no other choice because it's the only thing you could do, is like, you have to do it. Like you just have to sit down and make this your full-time job, or like not even like a job, but it's like it's your occupation, like it's your life. So I think that you just maybe you need to accept this if you're one of those people who's really in denial about it, about like, okay, I'm gonna work full-time, but the art is kind of a side hustle, and like I'd love to write the book one day. Maybe it will happen, maybe it won't. Like if you know in your heart that you're an artist, then like you just have to accept it and be like, okay, the job is the side hustle and I'm a full-time artist working for myself, or just like working for the cause of the creative spirit or that sort of thing. Like you need to really think about where your priorities lie. And if you notice that, your life is set up in a way that art is something that you're really doing very occasionally, like really setting aside that time of like, every day I'm going to sit at my desk for this many hours and do art. And like it could help to really build up your creative practice gradually. So if you're someone who's like maybe not even making art every day, like it's so easy to just do 10 minutes, 15 minutes a day of like something very low stakes, like journaling, and like very like free association. Like just get a piece of paper, like a blank piece of paper, and write down whatever comes to mind. One word, could be a full sentence, and just like images, colors, like really be free with it and like playful. And especially if you went to art school, like maybe try and forget a little bit of that stuff about like what is your thesis, like what is your message, like, and just maybe go back even further and like go back to that like childhood self of like you were playing with crayons, right? You weren't thinking like, oh, like what is this achieving in society when I draw this sun in the corner of the page? Like you're sitting there and you're like looking at the beautiful colors of the crayon and you're like in awe of that. So like tap into that energy and just like get into enjoying creating on a daily basis. So some of the strategies that I employ on a day-to-day basis as someone who I would say is maybe more in like casually creative practice. Like I would consider myself very part-time, but part of that is because I do have a wrist injury in my right wrist. So if I'm drawing for like full-time hours, it will get really bad and then I can't draw at all for weeks. So like as someone who's pacing themselves but still believes in making art every day, this is what I do. So I have a few different things that I will do every single day. And like it's kind of like a checklist for me. So I always have to do a little bit of writing and a little bit of drawing and then, a little bit of something a little bit more technical, like doing some sort of skill. And so this could be like something like video editing or like trying to learn music or different programs on the computer and just kind of some new skill acquisition. So it's like the things that I've already been doing and then I'm adding on a little bit more to that. So how I write every day, I would take a journal and like just free associate several pages a day. And like sometimes it's kind of interesting. Sometimes it comes out more like a diary and it's just like factual, and sometimes it comes out really poetic and then it kind of surprises me because you really never know what you're gonna get. So even if you're in this mode of like, I have nothing to write, I have nothing to say, like you literally don't know what's gonna come out. You just gotta sit down and open yourself up to it. And when it comes to drawing, like to me, this is just something I've been doing for such a long time that like if I have a napkin or something, like I'll end up doodling on it. So it's not so much like an intentional like, okay, it's time to like study anatomy, which maybe I should be doing a little bit more. If you've ever seen my drawings, I can't draw hands. So but just like, bring a sketchbook with you everywhere you go, because you never know when you're going to get in that mood of like, oh, I kind of wish I could doodle something or take a little note down or a little sketch. So just like always have paper and pens around you. And like I'm specifically speaking to visual artists just because that's my experience. But of course, if you work in some other mode of art, like I'm sure you could come up with an equivalent of like, taking like a little voice note or writing something in a journal and that sort of thing. I would say that definitely meditation has helped me a lot, although, like, I would say I'm not meditating as much as I would like to, of course, but, every day is ideal, but, don't be hard on yourself, like, just as much as you can, just because this is something that will really help you tap into that creative energy and, like, by stilling your mind just a little bit, I think, it will help you maybe create work in a more healthy way, because I think sometimes if you get into this like frenetic energy, like for sure you can be creating a lot of work that way, but I think just for me personally is like getting a little more subdued with it. It's just more sustainable long term. So it's interesting to try to balance that really like manic creative energy with like a calmer contemplative way of making art. But I think that once you find that balance, like that's really ideal. So I think that meditation has just been a really big asset to me in finding that balance. And yeah, the comfy chair and the desk for me, I would say is really important just because, just for your physical health. And like, you don't need to spend too much money on a chair or anything. Cause like, if you think about all the artists in history, like they did not have a $2,000 desk chair or anything like that, but you can get them used at like an office, supply, like clearance sort of warehouse thing, or like buy it on Facebook Marketplace. And like, if you get yourself a really nice comfy chair that you can sit on for like the whole day, it's just gonna save you a lot of pain in the long run. Of like, there have been times in my life where I didn't want to sit at my desk to draw because my chair was uncomfortable. Like that's so stupid. So just invest in a nice chair, and then at the end of like an 8-hour work day, like you're not going to be like, oh my god, I'm in so much pain, I need to recover. You're gonna be like, okay, I'm so excited to wake up and do it again the next day. And then for me as a visual artist, having like a nice big desk is really important. Just because, again, it's one of those things where there have been times in my life where I'm like, I want to make a drawing, but my desk isn't big enough. And it's like, it's so stupid having those limitations on the work you can create because you haven't set up your life in a way that allows you to make art. So like really, yeah, just setting up your space in a way that like art is the priority. Like, this is my workspace as an artist, so I'm going to make sure that it's clear that all my materials are out and visible at all times so that I can just grab whatever I need, right? Like, I'm not going to another room to a drawer to like pull out a pen. Like, the pen is on my desk permanently because I know that I want to draw every day. And then there's like a few little accessories that I have that are like more like minor things, but I think, you know, for you, of course, you got to make your own creative ritual. So I don't know what this is going to be for you, but just for me, I really like to have tea. Like, I feel like a really hot drink, it like calms me down, relaxes me, you know, like it really relaxes my body so that I'm not like all jittery. And I think that this helps me draw better. And then also like the sensory experience of it too. It kind of like is a good way for me to like pause and lock in of like, okay, there's so many things like buzzing around me, but now, just for now, I'm like getting lost in the sensory experience of this flavor, and then you just like lock in. And I think that this helps me transition from like, maybe I had a busy day where I was like running around and now I'm coming to sit down at my desk and draw. It's like having that marker to like split up the time of like, okay, I'm in this mode now. And a similar thing to me is incense. I love burning incense, and I usually prefer the sandalwood variety. And I have Japanese and Tibetan incense, and I love them both. And yeah, just like the smoke floating around, to me, I find very inspiring. And like, it just really gets me in this kind of more like mystical mood. So, you know, it really depends on the type of art you're making, you know, like if you're making some other type of like maybe more bubbly art, maybe having a little pink champagne scented candle is your vibe. But like, just for me, like, it's getting into that mindset and like creating the right environment and like mood for me. And I think a similar thing is like, I kind of like a dimmer light, especially in the night. As someone who likes to work in the evenings, I would say it's weird to me, and like it throws off my circadian rhythm to have like daylight lighting in my room at night. And I think that this can genuinely like be detrimental to your mental health, especially if you're someone who's like struggles a little bit with like routine and like daily routine, is that like sitting up all night long until like 4 a.m. but like in a brightly lit daylight room it's just gonna like mess you up. So I think if you think about the history of human beings and of artists, right? Like, think about how many years they didn't have LED light bulbs and they were just doing things by candlelight, and like how many artists would just be like, okay, I have to go to bed now because I don't have enough light to work on this art that I'm making, right? So maybe tap into that a little and say, you know what, I could just have one little warm hued desk lamp, and it's like almost like emulating candlelight. And to me, that's just been a lot healthier for me than like having the lights on when I'm doing these like late night working sessions. And then, okay, this one might be a little controversial, but weed, okay? And you can go back and forth on this one, like, and it depends on like the greater scope of your life as well, because there have been times in my life where I was like really productive while sober, and there have been times when I've been really productive and hitting the dab pen. I'm not gonna say one is better than the other, but I will say that like currently at this point in my life, like cannabis is like a little bit a part of the creative practice for me, just because I feel like you know, it maybe makes me lose my inhibitions a little bit. Just like when it comes to like what words I'm gonna put in the art, right, is that if I'm stone cold sober, I think I tend to be like maybe a little bit of a frigid person. So I feel like this just helps me a little bit more of like when it comes to like honesty and like maybe making me like more able to express my neurotic trends like honestly instead of like writing neurotically, if that makes sense. Okay, and then one more thing that's like important to my creative practice is walking. And like, okay, I used to think of walking as a symptom of like, oh, okay, like I'm actually cooked because I'm like pacing around and like walking. But I've actually realized it's like almost more like a treatment of like, walking is good for you and like it will make you feel better, and in fact exercise is necessary to keep you happy and healthy and like mentally well, and like not think of it as like, oh, I'm a psycho pacing around my neighborhood at 2 a.m. I mean, it really depends on you. And yeah, like obviously, like, a lot of this advice is like relating a lot to my own history with like art and like mental health and that sort of thing. So I think, it's going to be very different for everyone depending on what problems are holding you back. But I will say, just from my personal experience, I was that like depressed person who couldn't get out of bed for like years after art school. And then I locked in and started making art every day. So I just want to say that it is really possible. But at the same time, like when it comes to the long term of your life, just know that there will be productive periods and periods of your life where you're not making as much art. And that's okay. And you just got to like learn to live with it and love yourself no matter what your creative output is, because any amount of art is good. So I hope that this video helped you a little bit. If you have any strategies for productivity, please leave them in the comments. I'm sure everyone will appreciate that. And thank you so much to everyone who submitted video requests. There's so many of them, but I really want to try to get around to them eventually. And I really hope that this video helped you in some way. So thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.